Just a few years ago, Sony cameras were kind of a meme. People made fun of the ugly color science.
We're stuck with a lot of rough color on a lot of these Sony cameras.
The terrible rolling shutter.
Massive rolling shutter.
And the lack of good stabilization.
This camera's IBIS falls flat on its face.
But fast forward just a few years and now Sony is truly a top competitor in both the photography and the filmmaking space. And this new camera, the A7RV, takes it up a notch. I don't want to get too crazy with praising this camera. I'm trying to keep this review unbiased, but I will say the autofocus goes crazy-o style. For example, you can now program faces into the video autofocus. Also, now we have a bunch of cool autofocus tracking modes that you're used to seeing in photography settings. I'm talking animals, birds, planes, trains. We got it all, and now that's in the video side of this camera, which is going to be helpful for all those wildlife and train and plane filmmakers out there.
Birds.
IBIS. What is it? Where does it come from? Nobody on earth knows, but what's great about this camera is it has 8 stops of built-in image stabilizations. I will say the stabilization is good, but it's not perfect. Don't get too hyped about this setting. It's a useful tool like it is in most cameras that have IBIS. Just be sure that if you're using manual lenses that you actually program in the millimeter setting of your lens that you're using. I did that with my Helios 44-2 and got really stable shots when I was kind of sitting doing some handheld stuff, a little bit of movement here and there, and the shots look great. So just be aware of that. I still think that Sony should hire a spy to go into the Lumix lounge and see what they got cooking up in there, because what they got in the Lumix S5 II and like the GH5, GH6, that shit slaps. A big headline spec of this camera is the 8K, and honestly, it's pretty sweet. It's a fun treat to play around with. It's gonna be useful in a lot of situations if, you know, maybe you're shooting something that's gonna need VFX or something that needs heavy cropping. 8K is gonna be your jam, but do beware of the rolling shutter that you're gonna get when you are shooting in 8K. It can get a little nasty, so just be careful with the movement you're putting into the camera. The 4K footage from this camera looks beautiful. It's the same kind of quality you would expect from the A7S III and the A1. We're gonna get into those comparisons in a little bit as well, but I'm just really excited that Sony isn't holding back in their photography cameras to protect cameras like the FX3, FX30, and they're bigger ones too. Like, this camera can do it all, and it's just really exciting that they're not pulling punches. There is one flaw with the 4K footage, but we're gonna talk about that in the later chapter of this video. Watch time, baby. Yes! The photos from this little black machine are absolutely beautiful. There's a ton of dynamic range. The sharpness is crazy. This is really gonna be awesome for people who need significant cropping in post or for people who just think size matters. The tilt/flip screen design is god tier. I've been asking all camera companies to make this sort of a screen design for their cameras since Panasonic introduced it with their S1H. Sony pulled through, and I'm just so excited because all the tilties can be happy and all the flippers can be happy too. We don't need to fight, folks. Let's bring unity to this community. The screen is actually bigger in size by 0.2 inches, I think, and it's slightly higher resolution as well. So this design is a win-win in every direction, and I'm stoked to see other camera companies hopefully copy the shit out of it. I'm looking at you, Nikon. Get your head in the game. Let's take the ball of the hook. Let's do this, bro. Let's get our screens up. Now, I'd like to dedicate this section of the film to all my Sony simps out there, because honestly, the A7RV makes it kind of difficult to decide which path to take. But don't worry, you have a Sony sensei on your side. For a second, think about the A1. As the flagship, it shoots 50 megapixel photos, 8K up to 30 frames per second, and 4K up to 120 frames per second. It has no flip screen, just a tilt-a-rooney, and it costs 6,500 buckaroonies. Okay, are you paying attention? The A7RV shoots 61 megapixel photos, 8K up to 24 and 25p, and 4K up to 60 frames per second. And it has the exact same 9.4 million dot beautiful electronic viewfinder as the A1, but the A7RV only costs 3,900 buckaroonies. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? The Sony A1, in my mind, is a waste of money, unless You absolutely need 4K 120, and you absolutely need high resolution megapixel photos in the same camera body. If you don't need those two specific specs in the same camera, absolutely get the A7R5 because it's way more affordable and it's better than the A1 in some aspects. Okay, we're not done yet, hold on. Let's consider the other big Sony contender, the A7S III. This camera I'm filming with right now. I absolutely love my S3, but I gotta be honest, when I was out filming with the A7R5, I could feel my wallet start to get a little bit itchy against my thigh, and it started to try to jump out of my pocket at one point. Luckily, I checked and my wallet is completely empty, so I'm keeping this camera. If you're considering the A7S III against the A7R5, I would only get the S3 if you absolutely need 4K 120. And it's weird to me that the comparison between this trinity of cameras all kind of comes down to that 4K 120 spec. And if you don't need it, A7R5 absolutely. Let's be real for a singular chapter in this video. Not everybody out there wants to be a Sony simp, and Sony cameras are pretty dang expensive. So what other options are there in this sweet little life? The Canon R6 Mark II. Now there's a reason I added a fart noise while saying the name of that camera. Two of my close buddies own the R5 and the R7, and both of them recently have had sensor issues to the point where they cannot use their cameras on a shoot at all. And apparently the Canon customer service experience is about as helpful as a drunk dentist, so I had to throw in a little grain of salt to this Canon recommendation. The Fuji X-H2S. The sensor on this camera is pure glory. You get those high resolution video files and also lovely photos coming out of this camera. The Fuji film simulations if you want to go that route. And no, it's not full frame, but it's you who asked for my opinion. Fine, you want full frame? Lumix S5 Mark II. We reviewed this beauty last week on the channel, and for $2,000 you get 6K up to 30 frames per second, 4K up to 60, 24 megapixel photos, and just a reliable workhorse of a camera. If $2,000 is your budget, this is the camera to buy. So you made it to the bad boy chapter, huh? Cameras are cruel and all, but what sucks about the A7R5? Well, sport, let me just say, if I have to review another camera that crops in while I'm shooting 4K at 60p's, I'm gonna blow a lug nut. Now, I'm sure this is because the sensor's megapixel count is so high that they gotta do a little croppage to make things work, but frankly, I don't give a frick. Sony, I expect you to figure this thing out and get a firmware update by mid-February, or else. The rolling shutter performance could be a little better, and you know, it's not god tier in low light like the Sony A7S III, but other than that, it's pretty good. In a world of the same old when it comes to cameras, this one pushes a few things forward and it gets me excited for the future. So I was thinking maybe we should do like a 5-year camera predictions list. So in 2028, we're gonna see a Sony camera that has more of a clean menu style like Blackmagic, but with the touch quality of an iPhone. We're gonna see it shoot full frame, 12K minimum, and 8K 120 easily. That we'll easily get that by 2028. And I also think we're gonna start to see some cameras that have more sharing functionality, like more easily being able to take files from our camera and just zip them over to our phones or computers or directly to social media maybe. We'll see. I think we're gonna start to see that kind of software come into cameras. At least I hope we do, because I think it would be really helpful. If you haven't yet, please check out my Discord server called the Mayfam. We have hundreds of creative folks in there that you can talk to about camera gear, life stuff, prayer, whatever you want, whatever you need. We're all in there waiting for you to hang out with us. Follow me on Instagram because this year I'm posting 2 reels a week. I know it's crazy vertical content. And please text me when you get home so I know you're safe. Been thinking about you. I hope everything in your life's going well. Hope you're doing okay, and watch out for deer. I love you. See you in the next one. Bye.
Birds.